do this.
So welcome back. We are going to start the next session. The session is on emerging challenges of digital integration in South Asia. So we have moderator Mr. Richard M. Rossow. And thank you, Rick, for joining us. And then the trigger presentation is done by Dr. Martin Rama. Please, Martin, you can come to the table. And then we have three distinguished panelists, Ambassador Farooq Sobhan. So please come to the table. And then Dr. Ajitava Raychaudhuri. Yes, okay. And then we have Dr. Ravindra Yatawara. So Ravi, you can also come. Sure, okay. So may I request Rick to conduct the session. Thank you.
Well, great. Thanks for having me here. It's a real privilege to be here. Thanks to SANEM and to World Bank for organizing this program. Very timely, I think. South Asian integration was something that certainly the U.S. administration spent a lot of time talking about, thinking about. But we've got this new administration in town, and I think they're not even staffed out personnel yet. So having conversations about whether what was happening in South Asia before made a lot of sense, whether the American contribution was useful or it should be redirected. Couldn't ask for a better time to try to set things off on a new tangent in this town. Obviously, you know, the topic emerging challenges of regional integration in South Asia every couple of years takes on a new light as the dynamics between South Asian nations continues to modify and alter over time. Integration can mean a lot of different things: energy, roads, regulations. There's so much ground that can be covered here. Clearly trade, much has been written about the potential benefits of trade if the country were to integrate a lot more. A number of outside groups, you know, have been looking at South Asia, including, you know, the U.S. administration and others, and talking about the incredible benefits that would happen. Personally, when I used to work at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, we had a partner organization that was working with USAID on energy integration. Lots of events, lots of travel, lots of conferences, but not as much to show for it from the private sector side. It was very difficult to get in. Bangladesh, not comfortable with opening up gas markets. India wanting to control so much of its energy market. So you just saw a lot of difficulties there. The untapped potential from Nepal for hydro. So the pieces were all on the table, and anybody could stand there and look at them and say, you know, there's a lot of opportunity for integration, but moving on has been a slow, painful process. I think, you know, as was kind of posited in one of the lead-ups to this, you know, India sitting at the center and kind of the linchpin for what might or might not happen. I think Prime Minister Modi has come in with a very different outlook, willing to pull the plug for all intents and purposes on SAARC as an institution, paying a lot less attention to SAARC, and instead trying to create these little coalitions of the willing. So countries in South Asia that are willing to sign agreements and begin to integrate, thinking let's move forward on those regional groupings instead of trying to get the entire subcontinent together. That again, you know, points to another question I think that sits before U.S. foreign policy, which, you know, we've long thought that SAARC played some value in being one place India and Pakistan could come and have civil conversations. But at the same time, if you want to see progress, these mini groupings seem to have a little bit more energy in getting things done. And I don't know whether we've really made much of a determination from the U.S. Side either on whether trying to keep a little bit of momentum behind SAARC or trying to add support to these mini groupings makes more sense. With a panel like this, I think we'll be able to uncover a lot of those kind of questions and hear different perceptions on it that'll help flesh out our own thinking. I think a great line early in the Modi administration, one of his most important economic deputies, Amitabh Kant, was coming through Washington, D.C., talking about the early days of this Make in India campaign. And somebody had raised the question to Amitabh during that session, you know, hey, you know, South Asia is just not very integrated. You know, you look at American relations with our neighbors and Europe and that kind of stuff, you know, that should be a great priority of the Modi administration. And Amitabh, his response in his classic style in a public setting was, we would gladly trade you Pakistan for Canada if you'd be willing to make that bet. Yeah, no holds barred with that guy. A lot of fun. But, you know, I think more recently with programs like Belt and Road, with China starting to play a role, we see a new player coming in with bigger resources than what certainly the United States and others can offer. Trying of its own models, but not always doing so in the most inclusive approach that I think everybody in South Asia would like to see. So a lot of the world, I think, is wary of the consequences, and that came up a couple of times on the previous panel. What are the consequences for accepting these loans and programs from China a little bit longer down the road? I will make one small plug for a program that some colleagues are doing at CSIS. I'm not personally leading this, but we have a new program called Reconnecting Asia. And my background is very much in the private sector, so when I hear governments announce these plans and projects and working together, I always think, is there money to be made in it, and if so, is it going to be sustainable? Our Reconnecting Asia project, it's a new mini website that we pulled together. It's a massive database where you can look at a map across all of these infrastructure projects that are being done across Asia. Who's funding them? Which country of origin is the money coming from? But I think almost as importantly, who's winning those contracts? Each one of these, whether it's a port or a road or an airport or anything else, if they're going to start moving, a contract has to be offered, an RFP issued, a company, whether it's government controlled or not, is going to bid on and win it. So the real winners and losers for this, of course, as everybody in this room knows, it's not announcing $40 billion. That money will be spent somehow, presumably, and if so, different countries will win the contracts, companies in those countries. So we've got a big team of researchers who's doing nothing but trying to peel apart these individual deals. So the answer for South Asian integration and winners and losers, there is no simple answer there, and a lot of different perceptions. So again, we've got a terrific panel to try to unpackage some of that and see different perspectives on what's really happening and what it's going to mean. Of course, Martin was here before, doesn't need a second introduction. Farooq Sobhan, Ambassador Farooq Sobhan, President of the Bangladesh Enterprise Institute. I think everybody is probably familiar with his incredible work. Executive Chairman of the Board of Investment and Special Envoy to the Prime Minister. Bangladesh's Foreign Secretary, led missions in India, China, Malaysia, as well as the United Nations. Ajitava was on the last one as well. The last new panelist, Ravindra Yatawara from the World Bank's Trade and Competitive Practice, co-leads the work on intra-regional foreign investment throughout the entire region and FDI's relationship to trade. So fascinating to take a look through that angle. And been a faculty at Columbia and University of Delaware. So that's the panel that we've got to try to unpack this big question. And Martin's going to lead it off with the key presentation here. So over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rick. Just want to take you to a few slides from a study that we have under preparation. It has been under preparation for quite a while and revision, but with a bit of luck, it should see the light of the day in this calendar year, a study on regional integration. Now, the study has 5 main points, and I will try to cover 4 of them, not all of them. One is just taking stock on how integrated or non-integrated the region is. A second is the big picture. Why so much interest in regional integration? And there are 2 dimensions to it. There is a dimension which is the prosperity dimension, but there is one dimension that is also the liberal peace argument, the idea that countries that trade with each other have fewer incentives to go to war. That's more the aspiration side. I will not go there. I will go into really the gains and losses. As Rick was saying, is there money to be made? And there I want to make the point that depending on the sectors you look at, you have from very clear win-win situations to much more complex situations. Some where you have winners and losers, and some where you may have wins but they are small. And so the political economy of making progress across these 3 areas is very different, which is what goes into chapter 4. And I want to end up with a word on the politics of integration. Not that we are specialists in politics, but I think in the same way as I made the point in the previous session that the political economy of South Asia is very important to understand what the options are. When it comes to regional integration, this may be even more so. So let me start with the most obvious things that you probably know. This is regional trade within total trade of the region. So you basically, in the numerator, you have exports from Nepal to India, and from India to Bangladesh, or whatever. And in the denominator, you have all exports from all the countries. And you can see very clearly this using our regional classification, that South Asia comes really at the bottom of the list. Same thing if you look at intra-region foreign direct investment. So You do have some examples. You have Sri Lankan companies investing in India, you have Indian companies investing in Bangladesh. But when you look at the numbers, it's really minimal. Now, it was not always this way. South Asia was not always this fragmented. So we assembled a series of maps of the political shape of South Asia over the centuries, starting with the Maurya Empire, the Chola dynasty, the Mughal Empire, the British Raj. So today our borders in the region seem very much cast in stone. But when you take, this is one of the regions with the longest history in the world for mankind. When you take this longer perspective, these borders have been shifting quite a lot. And the region was at some point, in fact, very well connected for trade. When you look at the, one can discuss the pluses and the minuses from colonial legacy. But one thing is clear, the British left a network of railways that was impressive. It was the fourth railway network in the world. So the region was well connected for trade. But I will make the point that where the region is the most integrated is in its people. First, a lot of people in the region were born in another country. Now, this is from a study from our colleagues in the research department. It is a bit tricky because the way this is done is by looking at population census and looking at where you were born. It doesn't mean that you necessarily move to a different place. Sometimes it's just that the borders move relative to where you were born. So when you look at the former Soviet Union, where Russian populations were placed in many areas, you will find that that's because the Soviet Union collapsed, and all of a sudden people who were part of the Soviet Union became Russians in Kazakhstan and so on and so forth. But even if you take that into account, if you take into account that partition did quite a lot of that with South Asia, you still have a lot of people in South Asia who were born in another country and still have relatives in another country. This is also a region that has a lot of the south-south remittances. In many other places, migrants go from south countries to north countries. In South Asia, we have a lot going on, especially in relation to India. But for instance, the story about Nepal, where you have Biharis working in construction in Nepal. So you have a lot that is going on, and when you look at the volume of remittances is quite good. Then when you look at the ethnic groups, so this is a map of the various ethnic groups, you realize very easily what you know already, that some of the biggest and most homogeneous groupings, population in South Asia span across borders. You have Tamils in Sri Lanka and in South India, and you have Bengalis in Bangladesh and in India, and you have Punjabis and to south of Pakistan and India, and you have Pashtuns and so on and so forth. So there is a lot of commonality, and you see it through the culture. There you have, I'm sure you can relate to this. You have one of the most stunning things, a person who wrote the national anthems of two different countries. You only see that in South Asia. Sufi music cuts across. Everybody is into Sufi music. Bollywood songs to a large extent are based on Sufi music. And then, of course, Bollywood. When I go to the South Asia economic students meet, what is the most common thing? Everybody ends up dancing on Bollywood songs across the room. So there is something that seems to unite the region. And let me tell you one more thing that is quite remarkable. We do a lot of work on spatial data. We have a spatial database, and of course everybody uses lights at night, that imagery to assess economics. When you use night lights, the biggest city in the world at this point in time is Delhi Lahore, a city that doesn't exist as such, but Delhi Lahore is the biggest agglomeration. You have something that is more difficult to cross than the Berlin Wall, and still in terms of agglomeration it doesn't matter. When you see it from space, there is no discontinuity. This is building on some basis, some older corridor that was working. So all of this to say, there is a very easy negative picture. This is the least integrated region in the world, and when it comes to people and history, no, it's a region that has a lot in common. And part of what It has in common, we have different work coming up. Martin Beletsky is here in our team on economic corridors. So a lot of the discussion that is going on is economic corridors. One of the oldest economic corridors in the world is the Grand Trunk Road. And if you think what the integration of South Asia will amount to today, it will be basically having a Kabul-Chittagong corridor that is functional. Okay? So let me skip this and go where the potential gains are. And I want to emphasize 3 areas where one can think that there are things that, because of their scale, go beyond a natural border. And these are energy, trade, and water. There are other dimensions, ICT connectivity, corridors, again, that one can treat separately. I just want to focus on these 3 because they have been, to a large extent, what people have been discussing. So let me start with power. I will make the case that power is really the win activity here. Power has 2 remarkable complementarities. One is seasonal, within the year. You have more generation electricity when snow melts, which is the summer, and that's when you have the biggest consumption of electricity in the planet because it's terribly hot. If you think that this is hot here, you have no idea. It's hot over there. So just because of this much, you could save a lot by just generating electricity in the mountains and selling to. But you also have, so in particular, India, Bangladesh have low demand in winter months, while they have high demand in the summer months when you have the snow. But also look at the complementarities over time. Let me take a perspective of several decades. This is the situation currently where you have the installed capacity in pink and the load forecast in red. And you see the situation around 2018, India has enough capacity at this point to address the needs of the entire region. So if there was electricity diplomacy in a region where the cuts are sometimes like 14 hours a day, this could be done. But it will be very different in the future. It will be very different because the capacity is bound to shift where the real capacity is in hydro. There is a lot of talk about solar, and solar has a lot of prospect, but one has to put solar in perspective. Until we have better batteries, solar gives you a lot of power at 2 p.m. and you consume electricity at 7 or 8 p.m. And in the meantime, you have to do other things. So when you factor in the entire complementarity of investment, solar is cheap, but in the long term, hydro is an extremely good option. And so you see that this complementarity over time, where now India could help the region, and India as the biggest market benefit further. Then let me say a word about trade. I want to set the stage and then go to policy. When it comes to trade, trade is among the most restrictive in South Asia. Other parts of the world have gone through the entire trade liberalization process. It has been more or less difficult, painful, haphazard. I come from Latin America. There, that was the story of the 70s and the 80s. The World Bank was a champion of trade liberalization over many years. We had Bela Balassa, who was one of our economists. It seems that South Asia has not reached that stage. Tariffs are still very high. We talk a lot about non-tariff barriers, but even tariffs are much higher than elsewhere. When you look at the level, we are talking about between 18 and 14 in tariffs. And then if you add, in addition, there you have in blue non-tariff barriers that are WTO compliant, phytosanitary and other standards. And then you have other non-tariff barriers, and South Asia is extremely creative in making your life complicated. You have to test for the quality of a product, and you have to ship it all across the country to some other part and ship it back. So it becomes really very burdensome. And there is an argument is that non-tariff barriers are worse in India than in other countries. This again with a methodology, the same methodology that Robert mentioned in the first session, on using these 6,000 product lines and elasticity methodology developed by our colleague Key in the research department, that basically infers from the volume of trade the implicit, once you know the price elasticity, the implicit trade distortions that you are having. And so once you have that implicit trade distortion, you subtract the explicit tariffs and you get the non-tariff barriers. And so there you have the tariffs and non-tariff barriers, and you see that overall you find them in all directions. Finally, water. Again, before I go to policy implications, water is very important in South Asia. These are regions severely exposed to droughts and floods. It's really part of what happened in the region. Red for droughts, blue for floods, and you see across regions that South Asia has quite a big dose, but especially when you look at the number of millions of people affected. There, South Asia, except for floods, South Asia comes really high compared to the other regions. And here again, we have an issue of variability that in a way calls for, is there room for policies in one country or actions in one country that can help the others. And this has to do with the big seasonal variability of the flows of the rivers in South Asia. And I take just the two biggest basins, and they have the flows by months in the year, and you see what happens. So the temptation here is to say if one could retain water upstream and release the water in a relatively steady way, one could really help offset these things. And it matters a lot because these basins are where most of the poor people of South Asia live. In fact, the Ganges and part of the Brahmaputra basin are probably home to something like a fourth of the global poor, or something like that. So we are talking about real numbers. There you have population living in each of the basins, and you have, in blue is the share of the basin in percentage of the country area, but in red is in population in millions. And you see that the numbers are big for India and Bangladesh and Nepal, and that the part living below the poverty line is quite substantial, and the same for the Indus Basin. So you have this, let me, since I have 2 minutes, basically, we know that there are these potential gains in the 3 areas, and so the question is, why is South Asia not doing these things? First, on the electricity side, there needs to be an architecture for electricity trade. That requires, first thing is infrastructure. If you don't have transmission lines, you don't have electricity trade. And for now, the transmission lines we have are very limited. There is progress, but they are very limited. However, there is more that is planned, and there will be much more, in fact, that will be needed. But there is also a need for agreement on the price. One of the big issues is what is the fair price when you are selling electricity. And that becomes a relatively charged thing, especially when some of your population doesn't have electricity. Bhutan had a successful way to proceed with India, but I think from a political economic perspective, what was fundamental was that Bhutan got electricity for 100% of its population, 98% of its population immediately. It's more challenging in Nepal, because why will we be selling electricity to India when a third of the country is not connected to the grid? So that internal political economy is also part of what is needed. So it's not just transmission lines, it's not just prices. Some people will say in Nepal, you say, oh, Bhutan got a rough deal and prices should be higher. CASA was stuck because of how much Afghanistan will charge for electricity passing through the CASA is the transmission line between Central Asia and South Asia. So there is a need really to engage. Second is on trade. On trade, here you have the barriers, the total barriers, trade and non-trade barriers, and you see that in general, if we compare the rest of the world in blue with South Asia, the barriers with the region, inside the region, are better, in particular, if you see Nepal, India, tariffs with respect to other South Asian countries are already lower than with the rest. You see it there. And trade liberalization should not affect trade balances much. So we run simulations, again, using this model, and you see that the overall trade balance, if one was to remove regional tariffs, if one was to remove regional tariff and non-tariff barriers, the balances will be similar. But there will be important differences in relative terms for the different countries. Here is what you get in increase on exports, Pakistan to India, India to Bangladesh, if this was to happen. If we do it with tariff and non-tariff barriers, Nepal to India, Pakistan to India. What is more important, and we're not going into the details because we don't have the time, is that there will be winners and losers by sectors. Very important. So we have countries overall, in terms of countries, let me give you the big picture. For India, it doesn't matter a lot because the other countries are relatively small relative to India. For the smaller countries, it matters, but you have, in some cases, sectors that are going to hurt. And when you think about the political economy, that makes very easily, gives you veto powers, and so we have it country by country what will happen with the winners and losers. Finally, on why isn't there more progress on water, which is by now one of the most contentious issues in South Asia. Think of the challenges to the Indus Waters Treaty that where the World Bank is a participant. It's the only agreement, river basin management agreement, in which we are assigning participants. And it was seen for a long time like the gold standard of this agreement, an agreement that survived 3 wars without being challenged, but now is under serious challenge. Now, when we look at the modeling of river basin flows, what we found is, first, a lot of the flooding is local. It's not coming from far away. It's happening through local tributaries, so we supported the development of a very detailed modeling of the Ganga River basin with all its tributaries. A lot is local. The flow is mainly from rainfall. Snow melt is more important for the Indus than for the other rivers, but if you take the Ganga, it's 4 to 6%. So the idea that by just regulating what is coming from the mountains, you will regulate the flow is difficult to believe. And finally, the reservoir potential is very small because a lot of the reservoirs that are in the region because of the terrain are for run-of-the-river power stations. So you can hold water for 24 hours, you can hold water for 48 hours of flow, but you cannot stabilize the sea. And so there are things that can be done, but it's very difficult to think that, oh, go work on the Himalayas and you will solve the flooding problem in South Asia. That will not work. So last minute. So what are the politics? We know that there will be a lot to be gained in power, that there are things that could be done in trade, and it will be more challenging in water. This is also the table where we see the gains as seen from the different countries. The win-win is in energy, and so what needs to be in place is an architecture that everybody trusts and sees as fair and has the transmission lines. In trade is the interest for the rest of the region should be bigger than for India. For India, given the scale of India, is the world that really matters. But the fact that there are winners and losers makes everybody very nervous. And you can talk in Pakistan or Bangladesh and you will get that feeling immediately. And in water, the problem is very difficult to coordinate, and it's difficult to claim that the gains will be huge from coordination. So there are different approaches that we review here on how to go through it. But I would say that the biggest problem from, the biggest challenge from a coordination perspective is asymmetry. South Asia is the most asymmetric region. When you look at the share of the biggest player in the region, only NAFTA is comparable. And when you have a big player, no matter how well behaved the big player is, and sometimes the big player is not as well behaved as one would like to have, and we see what is happening with NAFTA, it's very easy to have a situation that is not perceived as fair. Even the most successful integration examples are Europe and ASEAN, are much more balanced. Even in the case of Europe, a savvy politician like François Mitterrand was very worried when German reunification, because he thought that unbalance will make Germany too powerful for the Union. I will make the other countries much less amenable to agree. And asymmetry is going to increase over time. Look at this figure is you have the different countries in percentage of India in GDP. And you have, of course, in red you have Pakistan, and then comes Bangladesh independence. And you have the point where SAARC is established. Basically, Pakistan is at 17 or 18% of India's GDP, and Bangladesh at 11%. But if we extrapolate the last decade, it's just very crude. We extrapolate the last decade of growth. Look at what is happening in just 20 years. The asymmetry becomes even bigger. So that makes it very difficult, and there are multiplicity of institutional arrangements. These are a table of all the arrangements we could find. But that doesn't solve the problem that it's very difficult if there is not enough trust that is built among the players. And this makes it a very good case, and that's the plea the report makes, is that India as the biggest player will have to be particularly enlightened to bring a region with it. But it will be in India's interest at a time when India is seeing its role in the region challenged by the rise of China, and engaging on issues like corridors, and engaging in other ways in a positive and constructive way would be a way forward. But that requires a lot of decision, of political decision, and that's beyond the economics itself. So let me start here.
Lots of gains for the region, some great data to show, and in fact, even on water, I think a great point that not every sector maybe has quite the same to gain from integration. One point. Now let me introduce my great friend, Ambassador Farooq Sobhan. We heard a lot about the places, the region. One country that's gained a lot from trade in recent years, of course, is Bangladesh. And has a lot of energy to give and to get. So terrific to hear your thoughts, Ambassador, and thanks for coming.
Sure. Thank you, Rick. I think we had an excellent presentation from Martin, and I'd like to pick up a couple of the threads from Martin's presentation. The topic for our session today is emerging challenges. Well, as I had occasion to mention, someone who's been closely associated pretty much from day one with the process of South Asian regional economic cooperation and regional economic integration. I had mentioned that I'd written the concept paper for SAARC way back in November '79. And then when we sent special envoys to the prospective member states of SAARC, it was interesting that two countries opposed the idea of regional economic cooperation. And I don't think you have to guess which those two countries were, namely India and Pakistan. India opposed it because it felt this would be a forum for the smaller countries to gang up against India. And Pakistan opposed it because it thought this would be an organization dominated by India. Well, we were able with great difficulty to overcome that resistance. It came largely, I would say, from the bureaucrats, and indeed I would say the bureaucrats in the region, and I should mention that in a way I actually belong to that tribe as a career diplomat, but I would like to think that I played a much more productive and constructive role than some of my colleagues in the region, notwithstanding the fact that I count 17 Indian foreign secretaries as close personal friends. But I found while in office, they were all pretty much resistant to the idea of regional cooperation in South Asia. They may have paid lip service. The two people I found most responsive and indeed, I would say, genuine enthusiasts and supporters for the idea of regional cooperation in South Asia were Mr. Gujral and Dr. Manmohan Singh. And I had the privilege of working very closely with both of them over a number of years, while they were in office and while they were out of office. I actually convened a meeting with both of them in Nepal. The idea was to set up the South Asian Commission. We had Dr. Sartaj Aziz there. Professor Amartya Sen was a member, although he didn't attend, but he sent a long presentation. So it was a good mix of former prime ministers and former foreign secretaries. And they actually have been the people who set the course. Let me now move to the present. One of the consequences of the India-Pakistan divide on primarily bilateral issues, but which they have allowed those bilateral differences to impede the progress of regional cooperation and regional integration. So we now have a number of other initiatives on the table. One initiative which has now suddenly come alive, and it was an initiative which I took as Foreign Secretary way back in 96, 97, was the idea that if we are making slow progress as far as SAARC is concerned, why can't India, Bangladesh, Nepal and Bhutan get together and do something? This is now goes under the acronym of BBIN. We've seen some progress, particularly in the energy sector. I think energy really has provided a win-win situation, and I don't know if you're aware, but we now have an agreement in principle that Bhutan will provide hydropower to Bangladesh, and that India will facilitate this. So this is going to be a trilateral initiative. Similarly, I think we are on the verge of getting a similar tripartite agreement involving Nepal, India, and Bangladesh. What remains to me a critical question is the role of the multilaterals, in particular the World Bank. I've had the privilege of addressing and advising, I believe, 5 vice presidents for South Asia over the years about, the political economy of regional economic cooperation in South Asia. And I think the fact of the matter remains that India still has reservations about the role of the World Bank, the role of the ADB and the other multilaterals. So at one level, India wants, this is India's backyard, and it will determine, if you like, the role of the multilaterals and how much space they will be given to support regional projects. So this then raises a key issue. How do we finance some of these trans-regional projects? And I think the jury is still out. That is a challenge. Now, in terms of the emerging challenge, I want to focus primarily on what I think is going to be the key issue that we have to grapple with over the next 10 years. And that is the role of China in South Asia. So you're all familiar with the Belt Road Initiative. What you should know is that China has actually 6 initiatives which involve South Asia. And these would, in a sense, be encompassed within the framework of the Belt Road Initiative. So the oldest of these would be BCIM, the Bangladesh, China, India, Myanmar corridor, which India has formally supported, but in practical terms has serious reservations about. But in addition, you now have India and Pakistan in the process of becoming full members of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. The Chinese 2 years ago launched another initiative called the Trans-Himalayan Development Forum. They are also pushing this idea of the maritime Silk Route. And of course, we have CPEC corridor. One of the things which, and I've had an opportunity of having countless discussions with the Chinese in China, in Bangladesh. In fact, my institute has already done 2 big conferences on the Belt Road Initiative. I'm taking 2 large private sector delegations from Bangladesh to China on the invitation of the Chinese to see how we can leverage the Belt Road Initiative. When Xi Jinping was in Dhaka, agreements were signed totaling $40 billion. So in the case of CPEC, it was 46 billion. In the case of Bangladesh, it's 40 billion. Of course, we have to see the color of the money. That's going to be important. So yes, how do we translate some of these mega projects into reality is going to be a big challenge. But the big issue to me is the coexistence between China and India in South Asia. I think it's no secret that at the moment India has serious reservations about the role of China in the region. It has serious reservations about CPEC. It has serious reservations about the Belt Road Initiative. But if you leave Pakistan aside, if you take all the other countries in the region, including Afghanistan, certainly Nepal, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka would be the most notable examples. We would all ideally like to have equally good relations with China and with India. And ideally, we would like to see the whole connectivity, trade relationship, and investment, of course, include both these countries. So one of the big challenges is going to be the possibility of moving forward on the regional economic integration agenda with the participation of both China and India. And that's, if anything, realistically speaking, is going to be probably even more challenging than what has been the single biggest impediment to progress over the last 4 decades, namely the India-Pakistan relationship. But I would conclude by saying, and this has been my message to my Indian friends whom I interact with closely. We do multiple dialogues with the Indians, both at the official and at the think tank level, and I've recently led several high-level delegations to India also, is the recognition and awareness that India needs, and this was a point which Martin made in his conclusion, that India needs to carry the region with it. And that this, in order for India to realize its full potential, I think this is essential. And I think you just have to point to one very important dimension of this, of the region, which is connecting Afghanistan to the rest of South Asia. And you cannot do this without a corridor leading through Pakistan. To me, one of the key projects, and I've been tracking it very closely, as I'm sure Rick has too, which is TAPI, the gas pipeline from Turkmenistan through Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, and now Bangladesh has formally joined the TAPI project. So if we can make one of these trans-regional projects a reality, if we can have a trade corridor linking Afghanistan through Pakistan to India and beyond, if we can in fact address the multiple connectivity issues linking South Asia, China and the ASEAN region, I think we can certainly, all of us, add 2 to 3% to our growth. Bangladesh is projecting 7.4% growth this coming financial year. I believe Bangladesh has the potential to be growing at 10%. But the key to this is going to be our success in the area of economic integration. We have duty-free access to Europe, but we also have duty-free access to China and to India. But the problem in terms of duty-free access to India has been the non-tariff barriers. How do we remove these? How do we get the Indians really to think of the whole region from a totally different perspective? These aren't easy issues, and but the potential is there. Perhaps we can take up some of these issues in the Q&A session later on. Thank you.
And Dr. Raychaudhuri.
I can have a small PPT.
You have a
Great.
PowerPoint?
Yeah. It's there, right?
Can everybody see over my bald head here, or should I? I'll duck.
You are transparent.
Yeah.
We need password.
I can start.
Yes, please.
Well, Martin initiated the process, wonderful, discussion, very focused and very pointed discussion on the regional integration issues. Now, what I want to say again is something like, no, that's all right. Before I come to this, in fact, I will skip most of these slides because we don't have time. In fact, this will be complementary to what Martin said. Now, the first point which I want to raise is that in India and in South Asia, we depend too much on treaties. As if the government signs a treaty, integration will be attained. And we know exactly what is going on. SAARC is one of the worst regions in terms of regional integration. And integration happens, I would say, first of all, if you look at, ASEAN may not be the same as Martin said. There is some kind of a symmetry among ASEAN nations. But the principle is clear. When the ASEAN started its integration, it's B2B, business to business, as we are hearing from this. There's a private sector initiative. Then came the treaties. It's not that the treaties came first and then the business. Malaysian investors were crossing to Thailand, MSME sector there, for production of computer-related CPUs, chips. That's exactly what happened. So if the B2B initiative does not take place, only treaties will not do. I will come to this point. In fact, B2B, I in fact come to this point. So is there a role for treaties? In fact, in case of South Asia, if you look at this, basically, as Martin said, investment has to pick up. And unless B2B interaction goes up, because if you look at the ASEAN countries, trade is almost, if you take ASEAN plus 3, almost, I would say latest data is 59% of trade is intra-ASEAN trade is parts and components, not final products. Because it's because of the investment. Companies are investing, taking advantage of the fragmented nature of production. It's not the final good story. It's a parts and components story. It's a fragmented world story. And ASEAN has exploited to the fullest. And not true that ASEAN, asymmetric. If you look at this, since China has become so costly, it moved over to Vietnam, now it's moving over to Cambodia, now to Laos. Asymmetry was there, but the business-to-business interaction did not stop. It went ahead, taking advantage of the fragmented production and basically say the comparative advantage. So we have to combine two. Comparative advantage without fragmentation is an old model. Fragmentation with comparative advantage is a new model, not well developed yet. Anyway, the point which I'm trying to say that in this whole region, South Asia, the investment scenario is awfully bad. Business to business investment is not there. Maybe the treaties will help because it's open general license. I mean, investment is almost free. In India, for example, 95% of the sectors are free. You can come and invest. If rest of the world, and this is true, I think in Bangladesh, this is true largely in, not so much in Nepal, but in Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, it's more or less open. So if other countries can come and invest, if the multinational corporations from various countries come and invest and take advantage of fragmentation, why can't the Indian multinationals go and set up industries there? In fact, that's the point which I'm trying to raise. I talked about this fragmentation index. So obviously, where would you expect the fragmentation will go up? Machinery, for example. Lots of scope for fragmentation. Textile, number 2 in terms of fragmentation index. So why can't the big Indian industrial houses, there are very big houses in textile industry, there are big houses in machinery. So you will find that American companies are going and setting up their units in Bangladesh. How many Indian companies have set it up? That's the point which I'm trying to raise. It's an open regime. So it's not that somebody is preventing you. But the similar story holds. India did not allow Sri Lankan investors for a long time to set up their plants. Did not allow Bangladeshi investors to come and set up their plants. So this, treaties might help in this case to somewhat do away with this kind of a disbelief, kind of a suspicion. What exactly is holding us up? One has to do introspection about this. It's not a question of saying that, theoretically one can do this and do that. If rest of the world can take advantage of South Asia, why can't intra-South Asian investors take advantage? India has to take the lead. No doubt about that. We have so many big investors there. They are setting up their plants in South Asia. They are going to Africa, they are going even to Latin America, but not within the region. Now, what I'm saying, this is something again technical. This is a OECD TIVA base. Coming with the fragmentation is the sole concept of value chain. So the advantage, where would you set up the industries where the fragmentation is more possible? If you look at the story for India, I mean, OECD TIVA database only takes account of India and South Asia. No other country in South Asia appears in their database. But if you look at China and India, largely what is happening, they are more inward looking in terms of their investment abroad. Like China invites more investment within their country to take advantage of value chain. Similarly, India, they are not going really to take advantage of the value chain. At least the OECD TIVA base clearly shows industrial where the fragmentation is possible the most India has not invested. Indian investors has not taken full advantage of that. Let alone South Asia. All over the world, if you look at the Indian investors, they are yet to take advantage in those sectors where the fragmentation is. China, similar story. Maybe they are more interested in other investors coming and taking advantage of the value chain within their nations. And that's exactly China is very clear example. They're inviting more investment within their value chain, within their country, rather than Chinese investors are going and participating in value chain in other countries. Now, I'm not going into this. These are again ITC database, international databases which are published by other organizations. Sectors where you can invest. In fact, this will come up, India's potential investment sectors, Sri Lanka's potential, it's all ITC trade map. It's not my point of view. But if you look at these sectors, again, I reiterate my stand that the investors, the large investors, for example, in India, or the large houses in, some of them are in Bangladesh, also in Sri Lanka, they are not taking advantage of this. The B2B interaction, we can say 1,001 times that should happen. But in order to happen, something must be there. What is preventing us from setting up industry and open general license regime? Is some kind of a misconception, doubts, political agenda? Now coming to the political agenda, I will not go into, it's very simple things which one can do. For example, if you say textile is a sector where fragmentation is possible, Bangladesh buys a lot of yarn and cloth from India. There's inputs come from India. So why isn't it possible that there is a value chain which grows between Indian producers of yarn and cotton and investment in Bangladesh which produce very good textile products? In fact, in some sense, international data says in finishing, Sri Lanka is the best. In terms of general ready-made garments, Bangladesh is very good. So why can't we combine this? What prevents these things? I mean, in fact, I have spoken this in front of chambers of commerce, government meetings. Everybody says, yes, it should. Perfectly possible. But what prevents? There are question marks, something which is fill in the blanks. Who will fill in the blanks? Political leaders. Now coming to this, I have the last point where I will finish. I will not take much time. This is what I want to say. We talk about economic corridors. In many cases, if you look at the economic corridors which India had for India and Myanmar, we have economic corridors. Myanmar is not exactly in South Asia, but very much part of this. The corridor transacts in goods, basically goods which are produced in China. Local production, less than 5%. Do you think that sort of economic corridor we look at? If you look at the economic corridor which is possible between India and Bangladesh, the problem which is there that the local people, if they are not involved, they resist in terms of land, in terms of occupations, in terms of their participation in the process. And as we are talking about these political economy questions, if the pressure mounts from people, the political parties respond. It's a political business cycle, clearly. If the pressure mounts, it will work. And if the people who are there in the economic corridor, in the border regions, in border trade, or in general, if they feel they can be party to this business-to-business interaction, in this integration process, the pressure will mount. The politics will respond. But theoretically, if we have political theories, which I doubt they have any methodology, political scientists, unfortunately, all these methodologically weak political theories will not work, no matter what political economy you do. We have done some kinds of surveys among border regions. People have different kinds of perception. Skilled people have some kind of a perception. Unskilled, who are 80% of the population, have other kinds of perception. If you cannot combine perceptions, how would you say that they will mount a pressure among the polity, among the institution, so that these things will succeed? Thank you.
Dr. Yatawara?
culture, we're trying to bring in some of the formality of the trade literature into the foreign investment literature. And what we're also doing is incorporating the business literature. So we actually talk more about firm to firms and their behavior, things like that. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of with some work in progress and just some motivations of things we've been finding. So just want to make 2 points: the role of inter-regional investment in regional integration and value chains, and the second one is more on the private sector side, which I call very soft infrastructure, but about relationships, and not so much what we think of in terms of political economy and lobbying governments, but actually private sector relationships between themselves. So compared to trade, what foreign investment thinks of, there's lots of PhD students. Everyone remembers sort of the Melitz model of a sort of fixed cost of entry and fixed, sunk cost first and then a fixed cost. So you can think of that in the same sort of framework, right, as foreign investment, but think that your sunk cost of entry in foreign investment is higher than for trade, right? You have to do much more research before you start investing in a place. And then your actual fixed costs of actually doing it are also higher, which is from that kind of a framework. So the thing that's sort of good, if they actually do it, and it's good for regional integrations, we're talking about much more money, right? So that means a greater stability of the relationship, right? So that will like last longer, it's a deeper commitment. And so then that sort of perpetuates the regional engagement. Now, sometimes we trade, if your neighbor is your source of filling up shortages during food shortages or something like that, and if you look at some of the South Asia trade, it's very spotty, right? You have big imports of a certain product, then nothing for 5 years, then again, and all of that. So that sort of, suggests a sort of a very haphazard and sort of short-term sorts of relationships that are going on, which are not sustainable. So that's also probably an issue, but I'm going to focus here just on the foreign investment side. What we have here is then that it's just less than 1 percentage point, 7% of all of the foreign investment that comes into the region. Only 0.7% would come from within the region. Okay. Now, one of the things about South Asia, and this is the World Bank's categorizations based only for non-high income economies, right? So these are our developing countries investing with each other. So if you just look at the numbers there, it's like 8% is the highest with sub-Saharan Africa, right? And so it's also true in value terms. One of the sad things about South Asia is we don't have some big country that's very, very rich next to us, right? And when you actually sort of incorporate the neighborhood with high-income economies, you can see that this sort of intra-regional investment goes up much more, right? So this is the regions, but for example, now East Asia is not just Indonesia investing in Vietnam, but it's also Singapore investing in Vietnam. So when you take that, things go up much, much further, right? So East Asia was, 6%, now it's 48%, right? So we have that issue for South Asia because we don't have a high-income neighbor. And doing the same sort of analysis for trade agreements, you can see we're actually the worst in terms of inter-regional investment. Okay, the EAC is the East African community that has been doing well. Okay, so with this low sort of inward investment, one of the things we wanted to do is also, okay, why is this thing so low, right? And everyone, generally, if we're looking at including the bank, we're looking at our inward foreign investment policies, right? And they're generally liberal, with certain industrial variants, and the bank as well. We sort of look into doing helping with the business environment and doing business kinds of indicators to facilitate investment, and not just now investment attraction, but also retention and expansion, right? But what we also want to say is, look, this might be also low because look at the outward investment regime, and I think that has not been addressed enough, right? And so Bangladesh is only now slowly opening up about their outward investment regime. The outward investment regime in Nepal and Bhutan pretty much is banned, right? So you can't be expecting inter-regional investment if you're not allowed to invest abroad, right? And one of the reasons that I think a new reason is, capital liberalization is considered sort of a macro issue that IMF deals with, but now global value chains make it a micro issue because it's not, if you sort of think about this smiley curve, right, about different value addeds and different profit margins in different parts of the chain, right? So for example, there's a lot of, in many industries like apparel, high profit margins at the retail sector, right? So what if a Bangladeshi producer doesn't want to just send their products to India, but they actually want to open up a store there and capture those margins for themselves? Why would you want to prevent one of your entrepreneurs from capturing the margins, which will then also help your own country? You'd rather just give it to, across the border entrepreneur and they'll capture the margins. So why do you want to have the 2% on a t-shirt margin instead of 40% on a brand? So I think this sort of gives us a case for thinking about at least gradual opening up of the capital market. So here, instead of looking at intra-regional investment, I look at outward investment, right? So outward intra-regional outward investment. Pictures look somewhat similar. It's slightly higher now for South Asia, but again, South Asia is the worst in terms of these developing regions that have, that are not investing in their region, right? And I sort of do the same sort of exercise as before. I'll tell you what's kind of interesting. You can see it for these regions like ASEAN, and actually if you look at the standing up the higher region in the right-hand side, East Africa, the East African community, 30% of their outward investment is actually within that region, while it's 1.1 for South Asia. So let me go quickly to the second point that I was wanting to make. And we are seeing incipient movements in the right direction, right? We're seeing some outward investment, as Martin said, some Sri Lankan apparel firms and so on in India, retail as well as manufacturing, and we're seeing services outward investment, right? We can't forget the importance of that. We're seeing it in the traditional things that we think of like hotels, Nepalese investments in Sri Lankan hotels, in Maldives and so on, as well as India in Maldives. But we're also seeing it in things like logistics firms and so on, and that will also perpetuate trade and is sort of an optimistic thing for trade. But really, the work we're doing is about these pioneers. What we're seeing is these big pioneer firms, they're moving forward, but we haven't created a herd effect. And I just want to, if you let me, Rick, talk to you about things that are connecting these firms and why we're not getting the herd effect. So information. So one of the things is we have now globally competitive firms in South Asia, right? But not everybody knows about them. So if you're good enough of a battery maker in Bangladesh to export it to Japan, you should be considered good enough to export it to India or Sri Lanka, right? So I'm talking about Rahima Farooq's batteries, right? But does everyone in South Asia know that? There's no name recognition of that. So we don't have the information about who's really good. We have and the producers also don't know about the consumers that are there. But we also have a sort of a, we're so used to thinking about the first world sources as high quality. So we're not in that notion. So we have a bit of our own anti-South Asian bias about quality, right? And maybe that's there, but there are these finessed, situations we need to look at, right? Because we have, every country, I think, has globally competitive firms, and it's not just India. Even small countries do. So we have to sort of, I guess, in some sense, it's a niche kind of story, but we have niche experts, niche firms. The other thing is, so we need the information, we need networks for the private sector to be operating, you need the trust, and they don't definitely like uncertainty, right? So, for example, when we look at our pioneers, the ones who are actually pioneers are the ones who have some ethnic connection. They have people that they trust on the other side. Those are the things that are happening. So a regular person without that is not, so hence, like things like that are not creating the herd effect. So what you need, if you don't have a trustworthy partner, you need a contracting environment that you trust, right? You either need trust or you need trust compensating mechanisms, right? We don't have that, right? So those are the kinds of things that you need if you want to really create a herd effect and move forward in that way. I think one of the things we can, I think, talk more in the session. What I wanted to say is we should realize that we can do great things, right? And everyone has seen Bangladesh's great cricket performance, right? But there's a regional integration angle to it, right? And all the top coaches in Bangladesh have been Sri Lankan. So if and maybe you need a Sri Lankan coach who has a sense of how to operate than a British coach or an Australian coach, right? They may just be the right person for the team, and you can achieve great things. So I'll leave it.
Well, so far we've gotten in the Bollywood reference and the cricket reference. So what's left? I think we're done with the conference, aren't we?
Yeah, go on.
I know we started a few moments late. How long do you think we should
We
take?
can 1:15 or 2.
Quarter past
half
one?
an hour.
Yeah. Okay. Well, great. Well, let me. I'll have a couple of questions for me first to pose to the co-panelists here, taking the chairman's prerogative to extract from these folks some great wisdom, and then open it up to the rest of the folks. So think about your question right now. But first and foremost, this is I think a bit of the American mentality sometimes, and I'd say probably we share that with the Japanese. You hear India talking about things like first look east and then act east, and for some that means why stop at building a road through Bangladesh? Why not go all the way to Vietnam, to Thailand, and look at major lines of connectivity much farther beyond. Personally, I think great to have as like a master plan, but let's talk about Maharashtra is not connected to Bihar, so why not start there, and then you can talk about Thailand and Vietnam and things. But I'm wondering across the region, how does this kind of strike you? We've talked about integrating South Asia, but at the same time, a lot of people have great big ideas about something much, much longer emanating out of South Asia and going up through Central Asia, or going all the way down to Southeast Asia. So let me start with Martin and others that want to comment on that. Is it something to start thinking about and planning for right now? Is that something that should be staged? How do you look at bigger integration up through Central Asia and through Southeast Asia?
Let me get there in steps, because I think that that's the challenge that is emerging now. I think when I put together the different presentations and different interventions, people identify different types of obstacles. And I will argue that some are real obstacles and some are less. For instance, Farooq mentioned finance and the role of others. I don't expect finance to be the main obstacle, even when we think about integrating with Central Asia. These are times when there are trillions of dollars earning nothing. So if there are good projects, I'm sure that finance can be mobilized. I'm also slightly skeptical that the main challenge we face is lack of information. It's true that we may not know about this world-class producer here or there, but my sense that the political economy is more important. I don't get the sense that institutions are the challenge. I am relatively skeptical that truly multilateral ways of pushing for regional integration will work, and I think that the SAC experience is there to give us pause. But we have seen a couple of things that are very promising. One is working on multiple speeds and multiple tracks, and BBIN is one way to show that maybe when there is an opening, you take it, and others may emerge. But the fact, here's one of the areas where asymmetry, I think, it helps. Because basically, in order to get South Asia going as a region, basically you need agreement between India and each of the partners. Otherwise, it will not work. And so there is this saying about the 3 + 3 = 4. And so this is a complex region, and so even math can become complicated. But 3 + 3 = 4 is this idea that you have these two trilateral agreements that are going on electricity: Bhutan, Bangladesh, India, Nepal, Bangladesh, India. If these two are made consistent, because you are going through the Indian grid, it becomes 4. So you basically do the same, you have the same interoperability. The same could be said on trade. On trade, if I was to apply that formula, I would say 7 × 2 = 8, which is again another way of math. If you have a trade agreement between India and each of the other countries, if the rules are really the same, it becomes immediately an agreement between it. So I don't see the institutions as the difficulty. When I see the two big challenges, and I'm coming to Central Asia and other regions, one is the trust deficit. I think that the trust is something that's very difficult to build, and the other is geopolitics. So these are two levels that are much more intractable or complex, I would say, than either finance, information, institutions. The trust deficit, I think, two things. One is related to this conference. One is, I think, the promise of things like the Bushral doctrine, which was to say, in order to build the trust of the other countries, India has to go overboard in terms of being generous. Because you need to compensate the suspicion that you are the big one and you may become bully at any point. So that doctrine of being overboard in terms of offering concessions to the other countries is an important one. The other is people to people. And to be quite honest, one of the reasons why we are supporting consistently this kind of engagement is because people to people is one way to overcome trust deficit. And this is a venue where people from different countries, and there are many others. But by now, I think, as Ambassador Farooq said, is the geopolitics and the China factor that really to come really to your question when I see it because the China presence affects the position of both India and the other countries. I think in the smaller countries, you have a very strong ambivalence. At a political level, of course, they all welcome China. They have a big neighbor, here comes another neighbor, they don't be too tough with me because I have this other friend with me, and that helps. But when you talk to the business communities, and Ravi was talking about the business, they are very scared about China. So they are welcoming China as a geopolitical player, but they are really panicking about the Chinese products really flooding through these corridors. And it's the opposite with India. I think India was perhaps on the cusp of a bigger movement. the rise of China made it think that all of a sudden pushing the boundaries a bit further beyond and thinking about the region was a good way of protecting. But by now, you look, there can be a bit of a siege mentality. You have the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, you have the initiative in Bangladesh, and Nepal at any point could have a way of crossing, really, even if Lhasa is far, it's 700 kilometers, but you could have a crossing that gives another gate to, you have Sri Lanka. So that, I think, is really the new dimension in addition to the trust deficit that needs to be handled. Again, the work that Martin Meleski and our team is leading is perhaps through these big infrastructure investments, one can accomplish what is not being accomplished through institutional arrangements. And that's where the work on corridors, if corridors can be embraced as opportunity as opposed to be seen as a threat, they can be the ways to connect to East Asia, Central Asia, and so on and so forth. So I will see the two main avenues we have at this point to work on are the building trust across the key decision makers, the most influential people, and in some ways you are part of the influential people here. And then thinking strategically how corridors can help us overcome this challenge. And these corridors, almost by definition, go beyond South Asia, because the great merit of them is they make South Asia a hinge between two parts of the world.
But Farooq, there's probably not two big countries in the world that have done more in signing agreements and papering over old differences than India and Bangladesh in recent years. So how do you look at that too? Is it, I mean, as a very pro-trade country that has seen a big spike in exports recently, are these long lines a good idea? Are they real? Is it far off? How do you look at it?
Well, first, if I can just respond briefly to a point made by Martin. Martin, when I spoke, for example, about the role of the multilaterals and the financing of, let's say, this proposed trilateral hydropower project in Bhutan. I mean, I'd be very interested to know what is, in your view, the World Bank understanding of where India stands today, because I've tracked this probably more closely than anyone else that I know of in terms of Indian thinking about the role of the bank in the ADB. And my sense is that India has still not completely reconciled itself to either the role of the multilaterals in financing infrastructure projects in the region, or for that matter, even the role of foreign direct investment. So this is something we still, I see it as work in progress. And therefore we need to look at ways on how best we can tackle this. Let me now say a few words about the Bangladesh-India relationship, and this raises another highly emotive issue, which again Martin touched on, which is the issue of water. If you ask me today what is the single biggest problem in Indo-Bangladesh relations, it's the issue of watershed. Many of you may not be aware of the fact that there were basically two key issues which our Prime Minister was hoping she would see some results on during her recent visit to Delhi. One was, of course, the Tista water sharing agreement, where effectively we find ourselves back to square one in view of the position taken by the Chief Minister of West Bengal. But an equally important issue, which goes all the way back to December of '96, when we signed the Ganges water sharing agreement. I was then Foreign Secretary. An intrinsic part of that agreement was that India would help us build the Ganges barrage within Bangladesh, which would provide water during the dry season for irrigation and other purposes. This was variously estimated at a project which would cost in the region of $8 to $10 billion, so it's a big project. Where work had been done, as far as I'm aware, over the last 20 years, only to find during our Prime Minister's visit to Delhi that this project too was back to square one. So my sense is that on the emotive issue of water, which this remains in some ways a big stumbling block which influences public opinion. Let me address an issue which was addressed in various ways during the discussion, which is the issue of foreign direct investment. I think one of the points we need to recognize is certainly relative to the ASEAN region. South Asia has, by comparison, attracted only a fraction of the FDI. We now see the big player that seems to have entered the arena here in terms of FDI potential is China. We're not seeing any other country coming forward. And interestingly, China's interest in FDI in the region focuses as much on India, indeed more on India than it does even in the case of Pakistan and Bangladesh. So if they're looking at $40 billion plus in terms of investments in India, in Bangladesh and Pakistan, I mean, they're looking at $100 billion plus in the case of India. So can we make this happen? Because that would also benefit the region as a whole. And I made a reference to Afghanistan in particular, where both India and China have a keen interest in the investment they have already made in Afghanistan and for it to bear fruit. I should also make a point which tends to be overlooked. We spoke about remittances. The official figures for Indian remittances out of Bangladesh to India last year was $4 billion. The finance minister has personally told me that his estimate of Indian remittances officially and unofficially from Bangladesh to India is in excess of $10 billion. So my figures, and I've said it in print and in speeches in Delhi recently, Bangladesh is contributing somewhere in the region of $25 billion plus to the Indian economy, and we're getting very little in return from the Indians. So this too remains a big challenge. We are hoping that the two big mega projects that are moving forward, one is the Reliance LNG project, and the other is the Wadhwani power project, which has an interesting dimension to it, where the power will be transmitted from India to Bangladesh. The big issue has been the cost of the power. So to me, the key challenge is attracting Indian investment in Bangladesh and then re-exporting the product either to India, taking advantage of our geographic location, but also taking advantage of our duty-free access to Europe and virtually to every major market in the world, minus the United States. So making that happen is going to be a big issue. My last point is, let us not underestimate the problem created by our bureaucracies and by the mountain of red tape that still exists within the region. And I think that's something we need to do more work.
Ajitava, or I don't know if you have a point on the longer lines of connectivity. Otherwise, I can open it up.
Very quickly, one or two points. In fact, this is very clear that there should be, there is a task deficit, there is other political economy question, but I do believe that in general, unless you involve in this whole scheme, say the whole sea of unskilled population. I mean, we have 90 to 85% or so unskilled labor. How are they going to benefit? I mean, that's something which really will put the pressure which is needed for a change in attitude. About people-to-people interaction, think about Bangladesh and India. We have tremendous amount of people-to-people interaction, legally and illegal. But does it change the policy? It's going on for years. Trade. The illegal trade is maybe 80 times more than legal trade. Does it change the policy? Things move on. People-to-people interaction is something which we do not need to discover. It's there. And the problem is how to really make something which is non-human capital. Actually, we hit the way the people-to-people interaction is going on is not in terms of what we call human capital building. The moment we look at it, that some human capital will be built up out of this, that will generate or help in the growth process, things will change and the benefit will trickle and things will move that way. And the last point which I want to say about the attitude to FDI. I mean, India, it's very clear that we are terribly short of funds in terms of infrastructure. If India creates the infrastructure, as you were saying, and everybody talks about this road infrastructure, the general infrastructure with energy and other sectors, terribly short of funds. The present government, starting from the previous government, they are trying to open up, and in fact they have opened up so many sectors to foreign investment. But the intra-regional investment in this case is still meager. And how far this infrastructure investment will create the, so the level playing field with South Asia vis-a-vis the rest of India has to be seen. It's not that in India the attitude to foreign direct investment and in fact basically the infrastructure sector is the main thing is changing. It has changed certainly, but there are certain ifs and buts which will come up. But things have changed lately, I would say.
Yeah, I totally, agree with Martin's point about. I totally, I'm a big proponent of Martin's point about corridors, sort of compensating for waiting for policy changes instead of waiting for that. Go ahead with these corridors, and I think in that sense, things like air connectivity, I think has been very important. Even small things like, and of course, with the numbers, everything is India, but I'm very inclusive, and I think we need to talk about all the small countries too. So even, Nepal having its first flight to Sri Lanka, 3 months ago, that's big, and I think the regional integration should actually involve regional diversification, right? Especially for these landlocked countries, everything shouldn't be India. They should be able to tap the other countries in the region. So I think one of the things that sort of air connectivity and these corridors might do is also give them, access to the rest of the region, which I think is an important thing. And in terms of, I think, size matters, especially, I'd say, from the Pakistan side, one of the things we were arguing that, liberalization with India wouldn't be as dramatic as they thought, because already liberalized with China, then there'll be a shift between Chinese and Indian products, and they'll have to compete for that. So, in some sense, the dual Chinese-Indian thing can be good for it.
Let me open it up to the floor. We got a couple of minutes to go. Yeah, unless we're about to hear that it's lunchtime.
Thank you. I think it was an excellent session, actually, and a lot of issues and things to cover. I just want to highlight a few points. When it comes to the trade issues, interregional trade in South Asia, it's a kind of provocative kind of idea. But I thought that Bangladesh is the smartest country in South Asia. The way Bangladesh actually used the import from India and used it in its export sector quite nicely. Though I'm not saying that I will get a position in the ministry because of saying this in the prime minister, I don't like it. But actually, I say that so because if you compare Bangladesh with other countries, Nepal, Bhutan, heavily dependent on import from India, but mostly if you look at the composition of product. Even Sri Lanka, the composition, probably Sri Lanka is the second smartest country in South Asia after Bangladesh, but Pakistan is not at all, because of the lack of integration with India. So what I'm saying that import from India shouldn't necessarily treated as bad. The way if we can use it, I would not really be very much concerned about the bilateral trade. That's the first point. Second point, I think you rightly pointed out, Martin, very nicely, that role of India and other countries as well. We blame India quite a lot, but I think the role of other countries is very important. When you talk about FDI, all these countries actually it's not about FDI from India, but FDI from all over the countries to South Asia is very small. So the questions to my panel, when it comes to South Asian countries' integration with other countries or trade with other countries, rest of the world, then we don't really talk much about trade FDI integration because Bangladesh is doing very well, exporting a lot to other countries, Europe and USA, but even not receiving much FDI. When it comes to regional trade, why are we focusing on trade FDI nexus? Are we missing something? What is something's there, which we really need to tap on? And my final point is that, I really liked Martin when he talked about the NTBs and the removal of NTBs and how does it really affect. But we also need to provide some clarification when it comes to NTMs, which many of part of is legitimate, and NTBs because of many procedural issues, many of these non-tariff measures turn into non-tariff barriers. And actually in South Asia, non-procedural issues, especially lack of infrastructure and other bureaucracy, corruption, these may help, it's kind of, when it comes to real trade. So in that case, actually the very recent work, actually the ITC report is coming out for Bangladesh NTMs. It's showing very rightly that actually, that a lot of NTB or these barriers or procedural issues actually are at home rather than before the products reach the export destination. So, we would love to blame the other countries, but we should look at ourselves, that what we are doing at home. Because I can tell you that Bangladesh's exporters, they actually revealing that survey, so it was about around 1,000 firms in a survey, there are actually a lot of issues, challenges they face at home before they really want to export to South Asia. Thank you.
Well, that's great. I don't know if folks want to respond. First, I have to mention, too, it's not always considered South Asia, but Mauritius would have to be up there as smart places. A vacation tax destination, so don't forget little Mauritius. They're doing something right. But on your point about how difficult it is sometimes to move stuff out, I mean, a great World Bank study from just a few weeks ago looking at the effectiveness of South Asian ports, right? I mean, that has great quantitative data kind of showing how difficult it is. If you've got a product to get out of the country, it's still not that very easy unless you're in Sri Lanka. That's the one place that seems to be getting the port a little better than others. But I don't know if others want to take, was questions and points there. If anybody wants to respond to,
I'd like to respond to the issue of the trade FDI nexus. Important for South Asia, but not so for. I think it's relationships and trust and also information about those firms. So you have long distance relationships with Victoria's Secret and Marks and Spencer, well-known companies, information about them available, right? You don't have, so then you don't need FDI. You can have a contracting relationship and do business, right? But if you don't have that kinds of reputational effects within the South Asian countries, or you don't have the information, or they're all family businesses that don't publicly report their information, then you have a trust issue, right? And so one of the things is then you actually need to go and set up there. And then it becomes an intra-firm GVC kind of story. And so you do develop these GVCs, but it becomes intra-firm.
Can I just?
Yep.
One very quick point.
In fact, if you talk about Bangladesh, you are almost solely dependent on textiles. It's a huge 80%. I think a little bit more than that. So if you look at the textile story, right? Quota hopping helped Bangladesh a lot. In fact, quota hopping helped Sri Lanka also. Quota hopping is something where the intra-farm transaction, as you were saying, you have a problem of transfer pricing. You have a different ballgame. You have a different story in that case. But if you look at the Indian case, ERN import and other imports, which are, I think 50% is from India, the ERN and everything comes. But that integration is missing. If that integration takes place, certainly if that investment takes place, the textile story would be different. Textile machineries, the Bangladesh machinery, the textile machines which Bangladesh producers use, come from Italy and Taiwan. Why not India produce that? India used to produce textile and has stopped it. If that can be done, it's a huge market. Such an integration is possible. So that story has to be explored, which is yet to be explored. Things certainly will move much faster than that.
And my colleague Sarah Watson had a good piece after Modi's visit to Facebook, saying that Modi should have skipped sexy destinations like Facebook and stopped at Victoria's Secret instead. Because paper mills and textile mills produce the most jobs per economic output by the government of India's own data. And yet the Make in India initiative is all about, let's go to semiconductors. Let's make IT, trying to block imports of those areas rather than focus on what could be exported. Well, we got 2 minutes left. If somebody has a lightning question here, otherwise you can of course grab the panelists when we head over for lunch. Any lightning questions? Well, I'll just sum up real quick some of the key themes that I heard then. Martin talked about the big benefits that we would see to integration. Little downside, even countries that have trade deficits wouldn't see a dramatic escalation of those deficits. But not every sector would benefit equally. So to say integration is good, that's way too generic. You need to focus on individual sectors. Farooq, China and India must work together in this big thing. It's not two separate plans. Hopefully they can come together. But India would have to be the lead for South Asia and to take forward integration. Ajitava talking about deals must follow business. Great point. Rather than the other way around. Integration, is on component trade is critical. Taking a look at, because again with Make in India, you hear them talking about let's produce the whole thing rather than real trade integration involves component structures. Not moving finished goods is the only thing. And using job lens to help direct policy as well, not to be forgotten. Some things like economic corridors would benefit more formal structures, but maybe not informal. Ravi underscored, I think, this point on low integration of regional FDI. South Asia missing a powerhouse economy. India's big, but it's still a large poor country, relatively poor country. So there's not a great powerhouse that you've seen in other regions that have helped to drive. Mental barriers are plenty. Quality of goods, concerns that South Asians have about other South Asian goods, but also concerns about the quality of South Asian customers, not realizing these are fast-growing economies and there's larger customer bases right next door. And that also could be triggered by information asymmetries. And if those can be overcome, then at least quality of goods and quality of customers could be overcome too. So those were some of my big takeaways from the panel here. But please join me in thanking the panel for this great presentation.
Well, thank you, Rick, for sharing, and all the panelists. Please, thank you. We'll come back at 2 o'clock after lunch. But the lunch, Robert, you can this serve outside. Thank you.